Japan, Korea, China, Vietnam, and recently India, I believe few people doubt now that the Far East has become the most vibrant and promising region on the planet. Its importance is growing at all levels. It is something like the quarry of world wealth and increasingly the source of many of the great economic and financial opportunities within our reach. May 31, 2023, Asia drives global economic growth thanks to China's reopening. October 3, 2023, the World Bank forecasts solid growth for South Asia. According to the World Bank's semi-annual forecasts for the region, South Asia will grow by 5.8% this year, a figure higher than any other developing region in the world. Precisely for this reason, in this new video here, we want to talk about the latest country to join the list of the great economic promises of the 21st century. Beyond India or Vietnam, Indonesia, the most populous Muslim country in the world, is gaining increasing attention in professional circles. We are talking about a large country, reasonably young, with a potentially immense economy and a strategic location. And that is exactly what explains news like this. November 13, 2023, President Joe Biden and President Joko Widodo announced the comprehensive strategic partnership between the United States and Indonesia. And you know what? It is not surprising. In this video, we will discover one of the most unknown yet at the same time most interesting giants of the global economic sphere. Pay close attention. Hello to all the community of Finance for All, welcome to another video. Indonesia, a country made up of more than 17,000 islands, is relatively unknown despite being a country that is longer than the United States from end to end and the fourth most populous country in the world. With a population of about 275 million people, it is by far the most populated country in Southeast Asia. And that's not all. It is expected that by 2050, it will far surpass the barrier of 300 million inhabitants. In comparison, this means that in just over 20 years, Indonesia will have 2/3 of the population of the entire European Union. Of course, today it is still a relatively poor country, and that is why this fact usually doesn't draw attention. However, this is changing rapidly. Strong and prolonged economic growth is making this enormous demographic weight translate quickly into many economic opportunities. In Indonesia, a very large middle class is emerging. In fact, this country is rarely talked about, but since 1990, its per capita growth has been much higher than that of countries like the Philippines, India, or even Vietnam, although the latter has closed the gap in the last decade. The question is, what is the key to its growth? Interestingly, it has followed a reverse pattern to what is usual. From being an industrial exporter, it has become primarily a major exporter of natural resources. In fact, as you can see, in recent decades, the weight of the industry has fallen substantially. If you look closely, the decline began in the early 2000s, right after China joined the World Trade Organization. Then, investments concentrated mainly on natural resource extraction. In other words, Indonesia went from sewing pants and manufacturing computers, cars, and shoes to primarily producing minerals. Indonesia, besides being very rich in coal and gold, also has a fifth of the world's nickel. And don't forget, nickel is a crucial component in electric car batteries. Similarly, Indonesia is the third largest source of cobalt on the planet. These are just two examples of many that highlight the importance this industry has suddenly gained with the growing electrification process happening worldwide. Despite all this, economic growth did not suffer from the decline in the weight of the industry. Now, the process might be about to change again. After the boom in natural resources, with the cooling of relations between China and the United States, Indonesia presents itself as an ideal place to host the production of large multinationals. For now, foreign direct investment is already skyrocketing again. In fact, the agreement we mentioned earlier with the United States includes a very important point: the improvement of the country's conditions to attract more foreign direct investment. This means Washington is strengthening ties with Jakarta to make this country a much stronger alternative to China than it is today. This, of course, could further fuel and accelerate the country's economic growth. Another key factor comes into play: its strategic location. Indonesia is situated right along the major trade routes of the world. For example, around 40% of all Chinese trade must pass through one of the three straits controlled by Indonesia: the Strait of Malacca, the Sunda Strait, or the Lombok Strait. So you can imagine how easy it would be for many multinationals to set up their production centers here. And you know what? In recent years, despite being practically invisible to the international community, Indonesia has made many advancements. We could almost say the country is preparing to become the new star of the Asia-Pacific region. As we have already mentioned, Indonesia is a country made up of many islands, more than 17,000, of which about 6,000 are inhabited. Additionally, it is very extensive. To give you an idea, from end to end it is 5,120 kilometers long, practically the same distance as between Dublin and New York, and almost 50% more than the distance separating Madrid from Moscow. As you can imagine, this has historically made it very difficult for goods and people to move around the country. For this reason, one of the obsessions of the current president, Joko Widodo, over the past few years has been massive investment in infrastructure. In recent years, we have seen the construction of the Jakarta Metro, the push for a new capital, the implementation of hundreds and hundreds of toll roads, and the launch of the first high-speed train between Jakarta and Bandung, to name just a few of the most relevant projects. In total, the current government has driven the construction of more than 30 reservoirs, 18 new ports, 21 airports, and a formidable expansion of the telecommunications network. All these interventions have greatly improved the situation in the country. What we can see in the current government's achievements is an extremely massive and well-distributed infrastructure development across various regions of Indonesia. Alongside the improvement of infrastructure, we can highlight another great step forward Indonesia has taken in recent years: trade liberalization. Specifically, this country has joined two major initiatives to promote trade in Asia. First, it is part of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, a free trade agreement driven by China that came into force this year. But most importantly, it is part of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, a next-generation free trade agreement led by Japan, which has become the trending trade club. Its members represent about 15% of the world's GDP, and even the United Kingdom and China have applied for membership. Being part of these two agreements will give Indonesia a great advantage in integrating into international production chains. It is undoubtedly an opening that multinational companies view very favorably. Moreover, as a third key element, Indonesia is a reasonably functional democracy. In fact, in international civil liberties rankings, it ranks above its neighbors Singapore, the Philippines, or Malaysia, which is something investors typically appreciate. And lastly, the country has its public finances in order. The deficit cannot exceed 3% of GDP in a country that is growing reasonably fast, and with over $130 billion, its international reserves are sufficiently large to provide reassurance. So, as you can see, these are the four reasons that could make Indonesia return to prominence in the global industrial complex, while its middle class could grow by tens of millions of people over the next decade. Undoubtedly, this process would benefit many large multinationals, both due to their ability to make investments relocating from China and the million-dollar demand for goods and services that the emerging middle class will have in the coming years. It is precisely for this reason that today on Finance for All, we wanted to dedicate this video to one of the most promising yet unknown countries in the world. But having said that, the question is, will Indonesia manage to become a real alternative to China? To what extent can we expect this country to become richer in the coming years?